On this edition of the NESN Red Sox Podcast, we break down the impact of Xander Bogaerts' ankle injury, how Boston's offense has changed dramatically since last season, and whether the Red Sox's early hot streak is sustainable. We also preview this week's Red Sox-Yankees series and debate which first-year manager is facing more pressure. What's up, everybody? Welcome to another edition of the NESN Red Sox Podcast. I'm Ricky Doyle, joined by Dakota Randall. Dakota, how are you doing today?
Great. How are you doing, Ricky?
I couldn't be better. We're going to get into, if you can believe it or not, again, the Red Sox, hence the name, the NESN Red Sox Podcast. Before we start swinging for the fences, though, I think we should set the table a little bit here.
All right.
And look back. It's been Red Sox played 3 games since our last podcast, which was right before the home opener last week.
They still haven't lost since we last.
Yes,
had a
all good things going for the Red Sox right now. Sitting at 8-1 going into their series against the New York Yankees, atop the American League East. If you're into that sort of thing this early in the season,
never too early.
Yeah, never too early. And 3 very eventful wins over the weekend against the Tampa Bay Rays. 8-game winning streak overall for the Red Sox. Like you said, 8-1. And those 3 games, just a lot happened there. You had the home opener in which David Price came out, tossed 7 shutout innings, and the Red Sox, overcame a 2-run deficit in the 9th.
Good sign to see David Price get a standing ovation from the fans, too.
Standing home.
Yeah.
What a different David Price this has looked like this season so far. We'll get into that, I'm sure. So winning in 12 innings there in the home opener. The win on Saturday, a 10-3 win. The offensive explosion, I think, kind of everybody was waiting for. Highlighted, of course, by Xander Bogaerts' big day.
Yep.
And then on Sunday, a crazy come-from-behind win. Trailing 7-2 going in the 8th inning, scoring 6 runs, winning 8-7. So a lot to sink our teeth into here. Like you said, as they get set to host the New York Yankees for 3 games and the Orioles for 4. So as we kind of try to process everything that we're seeing so far from this team, Dakota, I figured we'd look at it through the lens of things we've liked and haven't liked from the Red Sox perspective.
Yeah, and for me, I think the biggest positive so far is I think the resilience has been really impressive. The ability to come back in some of these games. And I know it's the Tampa Bay Rays and the Marlins, and this isn't great competition, but coming back from 7-2 down counts no matter who you're playing. That's a big win. They did this a lot last year, but I still think it's a good sign for them that they still don't have that never say die mentality. I think a big one was Saturday's game when Bogaerts had the grand slam. They got down 2-0. In the first inning, Rick Porcello gave up 2 runs. You're thinking, this is going to be one of those days. And they come right back.
Especially for him, too, having the first inning. Because that was the first thing I thought. First inning was last year. I'm like, here we go.
Yeah, exactly.
It manifested itself again. But
there's going to be some kind of lazy loss. But they come back in the bottom of the inning and tie it right back up, which is a great sign. And they went on to win. So for me, the biggest positive so far is, the team has shown a lot of fight and a lot of spirit in some of these comebacks, and I think that's a great sign, no matter who you're playing.
It's pretty crazy how good they've been in extra inning games, too.
Yeah, dating back to last year.
Yeah.
I'm not sure what the record is, but I know it's well above 500.
I want to say it's 17-3 or 18-3 or something in the last 20 or 21. So that's just kind of one of those things that it's tough to figure out what to take from that.
On one hand, you wish they would just beat teams outright in 9 innings and not have to go to extras against teams like Tampa. But that said, it is good to see that they have the ability to fight back and win some of these close games.
Yeah, and what I think was most encouraging too about the last 2 wins in particular is that we're finally seeing the fruits of their labor, I guess, offensively, and because all spring training, all offseason, we heard from Alex Cora of how they want to employ this aggressive approach, which sometimes involves swinging at the first pitch. And that's something that you very rarely saw in the John Farrell era. So until this weekend, it was kind of is this going to work? Like, it's a nice idea in theory, but now you get the Saturday's big game where they come out, they score the 10 runs, and then Sunday with that 8th inning rally where they would just dinking and dunking their way. I mean, there wasn't like the big signature home run or anything. They just kind of decided stringing together hits and eventually came back.
Good to see Benintendi get a big one, too.
Benintendi kind of getting the monkey off his back a little bit. So just seeing this approach, this offensive approach, starting to pay off, I think it's encouraging because I don't think there's any doubt that if you're going to compete with the likes of the Yankees, who obviously we're going to get into them and in their offense, it just pretty stacked top to bottom. But then also you look across and you get teams like the Blue Jays. I mean, the Blue Jays, their offense has been kind of fired on all cylinders as well. So the Sox are going to have to swing the bats this year, and the fact that they're finally putting up some runs, I think, is definitely an encouraging sign.
Right, and I think what you're saying with the aggressive approach, that was no more evident than with Xander Bogaerts, which to go into some of the bad things so far. I mean, obviously his injury stands out. We'll get to that in a second, but his approach at the plate prior to the injury, I think, was so noticeably different than what it was, the last couple of years. Specifically on that grand slam, I mean, the pitch before, I believe it was 3-1, and it was a little outside, and he got a good swing on it, but he fouled it off. And the next one was just, right down the middle. And we've seen in the past, he tries to slap it to the opposite field or get some of these lazy singles, but he looks like he's swinging, to do damage, swinging with a purpose. And I mean, he crushed that ball, that grand slam, and that's a great sign. You hope that he's able to kind of jump right back into it.
Now, let me throw on. I want to throw some numbers at you.
Okay.
I was poking around on the interwebs this morning. Big fan of numbers, the numerical community, if you will. So the Red Sox have swung and missed at just 8.1% of the total pitches they've seen this season.
Wow.
That is the lowest in Major League Baseball. And this is all while swinging at 47.2% of the pitches they've seen, which is fifth in the majors. So, I mean, what does this mean? I think, well, if you're being...
So they're swinging at the fifth most amount of pitches in baseball, but they're swinging and missing at...
But they're also making contact at a very high rate. So, and for context, let's look back to last year. They swung and missed at 9% of the total pitches they saw last season, so which is the third lowest in Major League Baseball. But at the same time, they swung at 43.9% of the total pitches they saw, which is 29th in baseball. Okay. So, in theory, one would imagine if you're going to be more selective, like they were last season, you would swing and miss less often.
Right.
Whereas they're being both aggressive this season, and they're also putting good wood on the baseball. So and I think that's a product of, their pitch selection in general, and going after those balls early in counts. I mean, the first pitch,
you get the best pitches to hit.
Exactly, and I think that's kind of the mindset that Core is trying to instill in these guys, seemingly. And like I said, over the first few games when their offense wasn't exactly up to speed, you could kind of question it a little bit. But if you stick with trust the process, maybe you start to see the results. And I think over the weekend is when the first sign that you might be onto something here.
Right, and I think that stat that you said about making contact, making the best contact among some of the teams in Major League Baseball. I think we've always looked at a lot of the players in this lineup and said, they're good hitters. They can make contact, but the problem was, especially last year, the way they scored runs was stringing together singles, to try and sprinkle in a double here and there. It wasn't a lot of hard impact contact, and I think it's reasonable to say that it's because they're waiting too late in counts where they're getting not as good a pitches to hit and like you said, now they're swinging earlier in the count. They're swinging at some of these fastballs at the beginning of the at bats, and you're seeing the difference. I mean, they're making better, harder contact lately anyway, and they're swinging with a purpose. And some of these hitters, as I said, they are good hitters. They can make contact. They're too talented to not do more than just get some singles here and there.
To that exact point, just to follow up with a couple more numbers. I don't know, like overwhelming with these things, but they swung at 62.3% of the pitches inside the strike zone last season. The percentages, throw them out. They were the lowest. It was the lowest in Major League Baseball.
Swinging at
pitches inside the strike zone.
That's surprising.
To this point, this season, they've swung at 71.3%, and that is the highest in Major League Baseball.
Okay.
So it's pretty clear there's a whole new offensive philosophy being put into play here.
And so it was last season that it was at 62%?
Last season, they swung at 62.3% of the pitches inside the strike zone.
That surprises me because so many of those guys on the team are, inside fastball hitters, Mookie Betts being chief among them.
True, but I think that speaks to your point about being too patient early in the count, which, subsequently puts you behind in counts. I mean, if you're going up there and you're taking a first pitch strike every time,
right.
That's...
Right, and I think, if there's one thing on
That docks you in terms of that percentage I was talking about.
Right, and I think, it's smart for them to try and swing at some of these earlier balls that are, middle in, because a lot of the hitters in the team, like most hitters in baseball, but especially some of these guys, Bogaerts and Betts, the way to pitch to them are balls outside the zone, breaking balls outside the zone. A lot of the hitters on the team can't lay off those. And you have to assume they know it. They have access to film. They have coaches that tell them you need to lay off some of these pitches outside. And a remedy for that is to, as soon as you see one middle in, swing for it. Don't wait around because you might not get one later in the count because guys are trying to put you away with breaking balls outside the zone.
You mentioned Bogaerts. Mookie Betts is another guy I think that you've really seen this in. I mean, he's chasing fewer pitches than really at any point in his career if you look at the numbers. And you know that he hasn't swung and missed at a pitch inside the strike zone at all this season, according to Fangraphs.
I didn't know that, but it doesn't surprise me because, that is, without a doubt, a sweet spot.
Obviously, we're dealing with a very small sample size still. I think we should preface everything by saying that.
Right.
But then again, you should just be able to figure that out from common sense. But still, I think that's pretty amazing.
Right.
9 games into the season, you haven't swung and missed at a ball inside the strike zone.
Right, and at what point do we stop prefacing everything by saying poor competition early in the season? Because an 8-game win streak is an 8-game win streak. There are plenty of holes to poke in, and we can, there's things that, we can look at and say they should do this differently. We can second guess. But 8 games, 8 wins in a row, and especially in some of the fashion they've done it, I think we've seen a decent amount now to know that, maybe their approach at the plate is different this season. Maybe it wasn't all just spring training talk.
No, obviously it isn't all sunshine and rainbows. This team still has some flaws that we've touched on a little bit, but my one bad thing so far is an obvious one. The Xander Bogaerts injury, placed on the 10-day DL on Monday, expected to miss up to 2 weeks or so with a left ankle injury.
For those that don't know, it was a small impact fracture. What's called a talus bone. From what I understand, that's the bone that it's where the leg becomes the foot, which concerns me.
I'm glad we can get your
right.
Medical put your medical
I might or might
wherewithal to good use.
I may or may not have just looked at WebMD before we came in here, but and that's why if you kind of poke around, there's some people speculating, this could just be 10, 14 days, but some people are floating out 4 to 6. And personally,
4 to 6 weeks.
4 to 6 weeks, yes. And when you're messing with a foot, these athletes, they're on their feet all the time, especially shortstops, got to move a lot. And to have a fracture around the foot, that's concerning. It wouldn't shock me, especially with cold weather, if they really let them, take a little extra time more than the 14 days.
That's the thing is, I think right now, I'm not overly concerned with them losing him for this 2-week stretch. I think they can certainly tread water, even though he's been their best offensive player to this point. I'm just more worried about kind of the long-term ramifications.
Right.
Not long-term as in career-altering. I'm talking about this season. But just because we saw last season what happened when he suffered that hand injury, which obviously is a whole different beast when you're talking
right,
about.
that's the one silver lining is,
that it's not the hand.
We've seen guys still stay at the plate and be able to hit, when their foot's bothering them. Maybe they can't field as well, maybe they can't run the bases as well, but I don't know if it shouldn't impact him as much at the plate when he comes back as, the nagging hand injury did last year.
Right.
That obviously affects.
I'm also, but you consider, will it hurt defensively, the ability to move laterally, or is this, we've seen with Bogaerts before, if something kind of creeps into his head a little bit, is that going to become a problem? Is this going to be something where it's like he thinks to himself, here we go again, and then he comes back and he's not going. You're not going to expect him to perform at the pace he was early in the season, but
I think you can. Why not?
Well, it's.
Yeah, I think the way he's
at that level, but I think he's an all-star caliber player, sure.
He is playing like how we've always expected him to play. We've been waiting for him to show power like this, to attack the ball, to be. A lot of people feel he could be one of, if not the best hitters in the lineup. And no, I think he's hitting like 380 or something. So obviously not something like that. But when he comes back, I'm looking for him to continue the same way. For me, with him, it's all about approach. It's not going to the plate, trying to slap a ball to the opposite field and just get your single. It's drive the ball. You have the ability to do that. And, hopefully when he comes back, he has that same mentality.
It's going to be interesting, too, to see how the infield defense, we talked about last week when we were setting the table for the season about how that was kind of viewed as a potential pain point for this team. They've answered some of those questions in the early going. It seems to have committed an error, which is pretty crazy.
Yeah, that is. Especially
there's been a few where a little iffy. So
there were some errors that were errors but weren't called errors.
Right.
But regardless.
So yeah, that being said, it is still. I don't think anybody envisioned that happening through 9 games. But now you're going to be dealing with a middle infield that gets even a little bit shakier. Not that it's. I don't think Xander Bogaerts is. It's not necessarily a Gold Glove caliber shortstop, but I think he's better than
he's better than Brock Holt.
If you have Brock Holt playing there a majority of the time, Zhu Weilin obviously known for his glove, so he might be an upgrade in that regard. But where I want to go with this is that if you're the Red Sox, you look at this now and regret trading Devin Marrero. I mean, I know you have all sorts of thoughts on Blake Swihart, and I looking back at it at the time. I thought to myself, when they opted to keep Swihart over Marrero, both players out of options. That was really one of the question marks throughout spring training coming into the season was who they were going to keep, whatever. Ultimately traded Devin Marrero to Arizona
for cash.
For cold hard cash.
One player to be named later, but yeah.
And Blake Swihart sticks around, who, his potential is obvious. I mean, this guy is a former top prospect. I think there was a clear acknowledgement that if you traded him now, you're probably selling low on him. But at the same time, are they kind of, to use your analogy from last week, trying to fit a square peg into a round hole here? Because it seems to me, if you look across the roster, even before the Bogaerts injury, Devin Marrero might have been a better fit. I'm not saying he's a better player. If you put the two players up against each other, I'm going to take Blake Swihart every day of the week and twice on Sunday, just based largely on that offensive potential. But I feel like Marrero was the better fit.
I don't think – I disagree. I don't even think the conversation was Marrero versus Swihart. I think the conversation always was – Marrero, Holt, and Lynn battling for that utility infielder spot. I think it really was Marrero versus Holt. And for me, I guess I would have rather have held on to Marrero over Holt. I mean, we've seen Brock Holt. We know what he is. I mean, Devin Marrero isn't exactly a great hitter. But
what's Swihart's role on this team?
Right. Well, that's a conversation. That's a problem too. I mean, that's probably something that's been bothering me the most is because, the guy goes out, he has a great spring. I think we've seen more good than bad from Blake Swihart, and it just frustrates me that they sort of went into the season without any sort of legitimate plan on how to use the guy. And we saw him come in the game at first the other day. He started once at DH. I mean, what kind of message does that send to the guy? He had a great spring training. He's done everything you've asked him to. He's dealt with all this position shuffling. And, but the problem is I don't necessarily I get where they're coming from because, they want to have Mitch Moreland as the backup first baseman, and he's definitely a better defensive option. And J.D. Martinez really is your fourth outfielder right now, so Blake doesn't fit there. But I just wish, for me, I'd like to see Blake Swihart, get some more backup catching duties than Sandy Leon. I'm not sure. Now that Sandy's not Chris Sale's personal catcher, I'm not sure what his role really is in this team. I'd like to see Swihart do some backup catching and first base work, but yeah, it's just frustrating for me because I'd like to see them throw him out there and see what he can do. And the more you let him sit here and rust up, any sort of trade value that he gained during spring training starts to subside because now he's sitting here and he's getting rusty and he still is without a position.
It's a total victim of circumstance.
He is a victim of circumstance. I think he's also a victim of a little bit of misusage earlier in his career. I think the team was way too quick to try and put him into left field. I think they gave up on him catching too fast. And it snowballed. And then, he got hurt. He came back, tried to catch. He got hurt again. And but we saw that first year. The guy can swing the bat. And we saw it again in spring training. And I just think, you got to give him a chance to show what he can do. I know they love Christian Vasquez, but I just, give the guy a chance. But to go back to what you said, I would have taken Devin Marrero over Brock Holt. But I would not have rather have had Holt Marrero instead of Swihart. I would have rather had Marrero and Swihart. Because I do think Devin Marrero, let's call it like he is. He's a pretty bad hitter. However, I think he can impact the ball more than Brock Holt. Brock Holt at least we've seen Devin Marrero get some extra base hits, get some home runs. I mean, outside of his All-Star season.
I think with Marrero, too, you're dealing with, I mean, at some point there's a cutoff, but I think there's a little bit of untapped potential. And just based on, hasn't really had that much playing time, whereas Holt, I think you know what you're getting.
Right, but you know what you're getting, but is what you're getting worth keeping?
Well, that's what I mean. I think
I don't personally think so, but, obviously they love Brock Holt, and they love the Whitney Houston walk-up song, so.
I don't know. The Swihart conundrum is it's real. It's just a tough one to figure out because even as you mentioned, going back to spring training, I mean, it was presented as he was going to be this super utility guy, be like this versatile asset all over the diamond, but at the same time he was spending 80-90% of the time that wasn't in game action in catcher's gear, based on all the reports. He was spending a lot of time in the backfields in catcher's gear, where now it just seems like he's not even going to sniff any action behind the plate.
Right, and I think the other problem, too, is when he wasn't catching in spring training, they also couldn't decide what they wanted his real other position to be. I mean, he spent time in the outfield, spent time at second, at first. I think he might have even played a game at third.
Well, that's the thing.
So it's, tell him what his other position is.
In every place that that theoretically he could fit in, there's another option, I guess. I mean, what's the best case scenario? Where do you put him?
For me,
what's the best position for him to play?
I mean, if it's just me, if everything
noting too that things change a little bit when Dustin Pedroia comes back, and Eduardo Nunez's role obviously changes. That has a trickle-down effect throughout the roster, so we'll acknowledge that too going.
Right, and when Dustin Pedroia comes back, and if he's healthy and if he's playing well, I think if there's going to be a time Swihart gets traded, I mean, I think it might come, if he does get traded, I think it's going to come way before the trade deadline. Because I cannot foresee any, I mean, he has no more options. You can't send him down. I can't foresee him just sitting on the bench and getting in one game a week all the way until the end of July. There's no way that's going to happen. I mean, they still have issues in the bullpen. Maybe that's a piece they can use to go get one. I think the problem is too, I don't think they expected for him to do what he did in spring training. So for me, it's easy to say, well, just have him be the backup catcher and then have him fill in at first base when he's not catching, and to be the backup first baseman as well. But they signed Mitch Moreland to do that, and they made that move well before.
When you get two other catchers and Mitch Moreland back,
right? Well, but they signed Mitch Moreland before Swihart had his spring training, so I don't think they really expected him to come out and have this sort of resurgence. So, I think they're just kind of in a tough spot. But just because you're in a tough spot doesn't mean you can't develop a more consistent plan. So I'd like to see them address that more as we go forward.
You did mention the bullpen. That's kind of still a work in progress, I would say.
Right, and that's as we get into this week's big series with the Yankees, that's I think it's going to be interesting to see how those two bullpens stack up because the Yankees, many believe, have one of the best bullpens in the game, and right now the Red Sox, they have a great anchor at the end, but the bridge to them is a little unstable.
So, I want to ask you this because we started to get into it, but is this coming series against the Yankees? Is this where you kind of got to see what this team is made of a little bit, at least from the early beginning? Because as we mentioned, this is all fine and good. You're 8-1, 8-game winning streak, showing all this fight. The offense is coming together. The rotation has been lights out. David Price with two fantastic outings. Rick Porcello bouncing back from the early struggles in his most recent start to have a pretty good outing, getting him into the 8th inning, I believe. Chris Sale's been Chris Sale. Are you going to get Drew Pomeranz back at some point? I think that's a little understated, his potential impact on the team. I mean, he saved their ass last year. It's just,
right, and
let's call it how it is.
You also, unfortunately, got Eduardo Rodriguez being Eduardo Rodriguez on
True,
Sunday.
frustrating as that is. But all throughout it all, they're 4-0 when the opponents have scored first. They've battled back in these games, but it's come against the Marlins and the Rays.
Right, and at the end of the day,
what I'm saying is, I'm not sure. It's going to be a lot more difficult to stage those comebacks against the Yankees bullpen, which I'm sure we'll get into, or if you go around the league and you face the leg of the Cleveland Indians when they're trotting out Andrew Miller and Cody Allen,
right.
and Nick Goody seems to be finding it back there.
For me, I don't think I'm not going into this series with the Yankees, thinking, all right, this is it. Let's see how you stack up, because I still think it's way too early. But what I want to see is, the Red Sox big problem last year and over the last couple of years with this core that's been around is, can they hit good pitching? Can they, when they get in the postseason, they face some of the best starters, can they muster enough offense? When they get in these big games late in the year, can they hit good pitching? And, they're going to get it this series, presumably. I mean, Severino goes game one. He can be erratic at times, but that's a big talent. The Red Sox have never hit Tanaka well. He's going in game two. We still don't know, I don't think, who's going game three.
No.
So for me, I'm looking for the Red Sox this series to keep the same approach that they developed towards the end of the on the homestand against Tampa, and get some early runs against some of these good pitchers. Don't wait until the bullpen, because the Yankees do have a good bullpen. The Red Sox have had some success against it, but I want to see, does the approach translate? Does the change in approach translate against good pitching? Because to me, that's always been the issue with some of these players. Is they can beat up on Tampa, they can beat up on third and fourth starters. Can they beat up on an ace? Because that's who they're going to face in the playoffs. And I don't think it's too early to watch these games and make that sort of judgment. I mean, if they go up there and they get just carved up by Tanaka again,
right,
it's going to feel like here we go, more of the same. Yeah, they had a great inning against Colomé and all these guys in Tampa and Miami, but when they face a good top of the line starter that's giving them trouble, how much has changed?
Yeah,
that's what I'm looking for.
It's more about what you see out of these games as opposed to the result, I guess. When you're looking at from a bigger picture standpoint like we are, in other words, if they go in, obviously you don't want to get swept, but if you drop 2 or 3 right here in the series in early mid-April, I don't think anybody's going to hit the panic button. But I would like to see a few things, and I think, from a Red Sox standpoint, I'd like to see their starting rotation it is kind of coincides with your point. It's just outpitch them. Outpitch the Yankee starting rotation, because I think that's where...
In theory, you should. You are sending the better starters.
Well, that's the thing. So. Phenomenal pitching matchups this week, too.
Right, yeah. Especially if Gray goes in game 3.
Chris Sale and Luis Severino game 1, David Price, Masahiro Tanaka game 2, and then Rick Porcello versus the vaunted TBD at this point, as of this recording, for game 3. You're looking at probably the playoff rotation right there. And I just think if you're the Red Sox, one area where you identified, clearly you could point to as where you have an advantage over the Yankees coming into the season is that rotation. Not the Yankees. I think their rotation might be better than advertised, but I think certainly the Red Sox have the potential to ride their rotation to the top. So I think in this series, you want to see the dominant Chris Sale. You want to see David Price continue what he's had to this point, even if it's not 7 shutout innings. I think you want to see him build on, just how good he's been in what could be described as, this isn't, I don't want to call it a big game, but this is first big test in a pressure-packed situation this season. And then Rick Porcello. I think you kind of want to see the same thing from him, given some of the events of the past couple of seasons in the postseason.
Right. And I think for me, like I said, the big thing I'm looking for this series is, how the offense does against good pitching. Number 2 for me is David Price. That's the biggest thing for me this series is, he's done good in his first 2 starts against Tampa. But, let's see how you do now against, a big-time lineup in the Yankees in one of these big games. Because, Chris Sale could go out and get lit up tonight, and Porcello could do his same Porcello thing, 7 innings, 4 runs on Wednesday. Is he going Wednesday? Do we know that?
What's that? Porcello?
Is Porcello going Wednesday?
Yes.
Either way. So, those 2 guys, Porcello and Sale could do that, and it wouldn't change my mind at all because I know what I'm getting from those guys. I know what Chris Sale brings. At this point, I know what Rick Porcello is. If the Red Sox bullpen goes out and has a bad series, I'm not surprised because we've seen it, and we know they're not, they're kind of in flux right now. So what I want to see is how David Price responds. You're going against the Yankees, first series of the year. You're at Fenway Park. You're facing Stanton. I want to see, Price go after Stanton. I don't want to see him nibble around the zone, attack him, especially the guy struggling right now, and make a statement, that this is a different David Price this year, and bring your best stuff and let's see what you got. That's, for me, his performance will be the biggest takeaway for as far as the starting rotation goes from this series, because again, I know what Chris Sale and Rick Porcello are. We still, now in year 3 don't really know what David Price is with the Red Sox, and this could be a real big first step towards figuring that out.
Let's talk about Stan.
Okay, all right.
What do you make of that situation so far? I mean,
listen.
First of all, you better get used to those boos because they're going to be amplified the second he walks onto the field Wednesday night. The boo birds that he's.
Are you surprised he's getting killed like that in New York? I mean, I didn't think Yankees fans were that reactionary. I think it's great to see that they're engaged again because they've been kind of, I don't know, they haven't been as electric as we've been accustomed to in recent seasons. But to see him go out there and boo him this year, I mean, I love it.
Well, I mean, he's been historically bad. I mean, the start to the season so far hasn't been pretty. So
no, there was a stat.
He's done nothing to.
Right, and there was a stat we saw last week or yesterday where last week he struck out 16 times, and that is 3 more strikeouts than Joe DiMaggio had in the entire, I think it was the 1941 season. And again, comparing anybody to DiMaggio isn't fair, but still. When it's not a pretty start for Stan.
It's the first time in the live ball. I love it. The live ball era. What a phrase that is. I love when people refer to the live ball era.
To me, I can't believe the live ball era is considered after 1920.
But
there's got to be another cutoff, like 1970 to now. It feels a lot different.
You would be the expert having just gone to the Baseball Hall of Fame. You were just in the Cooperstown, weren't you?
Yeah, I was just. I went to the Baseball Hall of Fame on Thursday, and I had some takeaways. We'll get to that later, but I will say for anybody.
What is takeaways from Cooperstown? That's,
right.
Tease if I've ever heard one.
What I will say for anybody that's either never been, maybe hasn't been in a long time, is on the fence about going. I'd say it doesn't disappoint. Maybe wait until the weather's a little bit more reliable. But if you're a baseball fan and you've never been and you're thinking about going, I think it's worth the trip. One thing is, if you're planning on doing a weekend, good luck finding hotels because there's not a lot around that place. Not a lot of towns. I would suggest staying in Albany, about an hour and a half out. But anyway, so
I'll talk to you off air about you can be my travel agent. But what I was getting at was it's the first time in the live ball era that a player.
For anybody listening to this, get used to tangents.
That a player went hitless with 5 strikeouts in 2 games in the same season.
Right.
And obviously we're very early in the season, and Stanton has already accomplished that very rare feat.
Could you imagine if he goes out tonight and does the same thing? Oh, it'd be unbelievable.
Boy. I mean, he's the 3rd player in the past 100 seasons post multiple 5-strikeout games. It's just not a good start for him. And you consider all the buzz, obviously, that came with that acquisition. It's just he's got to bounce back. He's going to go through a stretch. Because even last year when he hit the 59 home runs, which I think you and I both agree is the anomaly.
Right.
I mean, we know how much power this guy has, but the fact that he put it all together and to hit that many it's the exception. It's not the norm.
And listen, chicks dig the long ball. We get that. But don't let the fact that the guy hits him further than anybody else, distract you from the reality that this isn't a guy that's like one of the best hitters in the game. I mean, he probably is the best power hitter in the game. But he is not the best. I don't even think he's close to among the best hitters in the game. I mean, look at his career averages. This is a guy that kind of sits around. I think his career average is 260 or so.
Yeah, I don't have a comp to present in front of you, but he has he's that classic case of you see where somebody strips away the names and the face and gives you player A versus player B and can kind of break it down as to how little the margin is, the difference is between Stanton and somebody who you would never in a million years imagine to put up that type of production. He's a very flashy player. And a lot of that stems from the long ball, how far he hits them.
No, I mean, he looks
he's an
jacked.
entertaining player, certainly. He's a he's a star.
He's a presence.
He's a star. He is a presence. He is one of the faces of baseball. He is wildly entertaining. So I love him.
I think that's reason enough for why he's worth the contract.
I think baseball needs more players like that. I wish they had more, physically imposing players like that. The fact that the Yankees have 2 of them, and him and Aaron Judge, is just, it's crazy.
Quick tangent. I know, because why not? Ahead. Quick tangent. If you could have one right now, contracts aside, would you rather have Giancarlo Stanton or Shohei Ohtani?
You've been dying to throw this Ohtani.
I'm just curious. Which one would you go with, Ohtani or Stanton, if you could have one right now? contract?
I'll take Stanton.
You'll take Stanton. Okay.
Just the track record's a little longer.
Yeah, I agree. I'd go with Ohtani.
By a little, I mean.
I'd go with Ohtani because it's fascinating. But yeah, and so,
although Ohtani is making me look like a huge dink in the early part of the season.
He's making a lot of people. I mean, he had a bad spring training, and I think there were real reasons to question him, but he's doing great. But back to Stanton. But and I don't want to sound like a homer. Both of us are Red Sox fans, and obviously, I think both of us want to see him struggle. I want to see him strike out every time. I love watching him get booed. It's great, but
yeah,
I'm not
going that far.
Oh, I am, but I'm not saying I love him on the Red Sox. Don't get me wrong. I mean, the guy if he comes to the plate tonight, let's say that it's a 2-2 game, at top of the 8th inning, bases juiced or something. He's at the plate. I'm freaking out, and I'm not comfortable. But at the same time, if you try and step back and look at it objectively, and look at his numbers, I mean, the guy can be pitched to. He gets, he strikes out. This isn't the first time the guy struck out a lot. I mean, when he hits the ball, it goes far. But I was reading a few articles during the week and over the weekend from these Major League Baseball evaluators and these scouts and stuff. And the thing they were saying is, Judge is much more difficult to pitch to than Stanton. Stanton's always not been that hard to pitch to. I mean, he scares pitchers, and that's definitely a factor. But he can be pitched to. Right. The guy, he doesn't make Ichiro contact. You can get him out. You just can't make a mistake down the middle.
What's one of the more amazing things about Judge's season last year was his ability to get on base. I mean,
right.
for all the strike, you want to talk about 3 true outcomes and kind of the way baseball is trending. Judge is a guy that
walks, homer, or strikeout.
That is it, man.
And that's Stan this
all
year.
You're getting.
Stan's getting walks too, and he's the same.
Yeah. But Stanton's on-base numbers haven't been exceptionally great.
No, but I feel like they might go up this year. In the American League East, I can picture, I can picture Buck Showalter and Gibbons and Core kind of pitching around him a lot and picking up a lot of walks for that reason.
It's kind of amazing too. Like when you package all that together and you get the lineup that has Stanton and Judge and Gary Sanchez and these guys that just can basically hit it a gajillion miles. And you have the Red Sox offense, which they infused some power with J.D. Martinez this offseason, obviously,
right.
But is going to rely a little more on maybe some dink and dunk, a bloop and a blast here and there. Not exactly going to put up huge home run totals. But at the end of the day, I feel like I'm comfortable with the Red Sox are at offense, or where I think they can get to offensively, that you're going to see at the end of the year that there's a very comparable production, but just in very different ways, if that makes sense.
Right, and I think that's one thing that'll be fascinating to monitor this year is at the end of last season, the narrative kind of shifted where people were saying, the long ball is back, you need homers to be successful. The Astros had a ton of them in the World Series, the Dodgers did too, and it became clear that you need power in the lineup. I think when the Royals won, they didn't have a lot of home runs. They were kind of small ball, stringing together hits and stuff.
Right.
And that seems to be the outlier. I think the big takeaway last season was, you need guys that can hit the ball out of the ballpark in the lineup, especially in the postseason. But you wonder, that's a year, kind of a year or two sample. Let's see how it goes this year. I'm curious to see, if that trend continues. But I mean, still, at the end of the day, the Yankees have guys who can hit it out of the ballpark better than anybody. So it'll be a big challenge for the Sox, no doubt.
Can definitely feel a little bit of buzz around the series.
Yeah.
For as much as it's difficult in early April because obviously it's still so early in the season, but especially when you're the Red Sox and you're competing with the likes of the Bruins and the Celtics who are about to embark on their playoff run. So it's obviously difficult for them to generate the interest, but it has been there. And this was something that I wasn't sure. I was a little hesitant. I had some trepidation of how interesting is this team going to be. They've been interesting so far. And now you bring in the Yankees who have all this star power that we mentioned. This is kind of, for me, this series this week is the start. Like you're getting this big series against the Yankees, and you're bringing in the Orioles, and you got Patriots Day on Monday. I love Patriots Day. I love Marathon Monday. All that goes into that. That is next Monday.
Wow.
Yeah. So this is the stretch I think where you kick it into high gear a little bit. I'm excited.
Right, and I think the rising tide.
You can feel it coming off me.
Right, and I think the rising tide kind of raises all ships in this scenario because, I think the huge interest in the Bruins, especially right now. I mean, they look like a cup contender. Unfortunately, the Celtics, I think reality hit once Kyrie went down.
Yeah.
But I think the interest in those two teams, and for better or worse, people still are all in on the Pats. Even though they lost, more of like an anger interest. And there's so much interest in sports in Boston right now, with the success of some of the teams that people also are tuning into the Red Sox, and there's definitely interest there. And I think the Yankees coming to town right now is a perfect time because you're going to have Bruins starting their playoffs this week. You got Sox, Yankees, Celtics are gearing up for the playoffs, so it's a good week. And I think everyone's just kind of dialed into Boston sports right now.
You get looks like some good weather coming up this weekend, at least on Saturday.
I heard something like 79 degrees or something. Ooh,
baby.
Yeah. Take your shirts off.
That's what I like to call playoff weather right there.
Right. I like to call it sitting behind a computer.
I don't think I've called it
typing from 8 a.m. to 4 p.m.
Yeah, there you go. Whatever. All right. I love. I'm big on hypotheticals and stuff like that. Throwing out crazy trade possibilities and crazy free agent possibilities and just who would you rather. So I'm thinking we play a little game.
Okay.
We call it soft toss.
Soft toss? Okay.
Soft toss. Some toss-ups.
Okay.
Red Sox-Yankees edition. Because I think that these two teams are in... This kind of became clear in like the middle of last season that both have a pretty sustainable window here where they could be competitive. Very good. The World Series contenders.
Smaller both for the Red Sox.
But...
Contracts coming up.
Sales
coming up. Bogaerts coming up. You got to pay bets.
There's more pressure on them.
More pressure on the Sox.
I think to make the right moves here. But overall, assuming they pull the right strings, these two teams should be neck and neck in the AL East for a few years at least.
At least, 2 to 3 years, I think. We'll see how the Sox do with some of these contracts. But, yeah, you're right. I think we can reasonably bank on the rivalry and both teams being very good for the next year.
What I'm getting at is like the juxtaposition between certain things across both rosters is kind of intriguing. One of which, the managers.
Okay.
We're dealing with 2 first-year managers here. Alex Cora on the Red Sox, Aaron Boone on the Yankees. Which is just, that's an interesting thing in and of itself. You look at these two teams that are contenders coming off playoff seasons, the Yankees being 1 out away from the World Series, and they both have the Red Sox having won the division back-to-back years, and yet they got first-year managers. So I was thinking, who's more pressure on? If
between
Alex,
Boone and Cora?
Between Cora and Boone. I don't know, it's an interesting thing to kick around.
I would, it's close. I would say Boone. Because at the end of the day, it's New York.
I agree.
It's New York. And, the Yankees last year, they got to Game 7 of the ALCS. And I think everybody looked at that and said, that's a World Series contender immediately. Then you add Stanton. I think anything short of a deep run to the ALCS is a huge disappointment for that team. Whereas I think with the Red Sox, listen, no one's going to be happy if they don't get to to at least the ALCS. But, I think with the Red Sox, it's let's see this core make some progress and see them win in the first round of the playoffs. And, I think both managers are going to get a little slack because they're rookie managers, and they'll get a mulligan if things don't go right. But I think with Boone, adding Stanton changes everything. You add the reigning NL MVP, the consensus best slugger in the game to a lineup that already had Aaron Judge and Gary Sanchez and powered its way to the ALCS last season. I think for them, getting anything less than getting right back to where they were is a huge disappointment, and that's not easy. Getting back to the ALCS isn't easy. Baseball's hard.
I agree with you.
And I think, and if things don't turn around in New York, I think Boone might luck out because maybe a lot of the blame goes on Stanton. If Judge and Stanton have down years and that 1-2 punch is sort of a bust, I think they'll get the criticism. It won't all go on Boone. Same thing with the Red Sox. If JD Martinez doesn't pan out and kind of struggles in his first year, he might take a lot of the blame, not Cora. But
I don't even think that he'll take a lot of. Obviously he'll take his share of the blame, but it's Dave Dombrowski.
I agree
that the pressure is on more so than Cora.
He's the architect.
So I think there's kind of an acknowledgement with the Red Sox that or at least coming into the season, that there were areas you could point to and be like, that could be a flaw.
Right.
The bullpen, for instance, the infield defense. Are they going to have that power? Is ultimately we're going to get to the end of the year and we're going to be completely wrong? And they didn't need that power and didn't get the power that they were looking for in J.D. Martinez. So I just think there were things with the Red Sox that you kind of look at and not built-in excuses, maybe built-in excuses, whatever, that you could kind of use to justify if they underachieve, to kind of save core a little bit. Whereas Boone, I think you look at, and you're inheriting the team that was, like I said, 1 out away from the World Series, that adds the reigning National League MVP. Not a lot of flaws to point to, maybe that rotation, but you have the juggernaut lineup, the stacked bullpen.
You got a huge prospect coming up, maybe the best in the game.
The farm system is just is littered with talent.
Yeah,
so
Gleyber Torres will probably be up before the end of the
and
month.
not even just the impact that those players could make for the Yankees, but the ability to go out. They can make any trade they want.
Right.
They could solidify any of their weakness at the trade deadline by virtue of having those assets.
But as could the Red Sox, which is why this
Red
could be
Sox
such a
could too,
fascinating
but
race.
the Yankees farm system is it's stacked.
It is stacked, but I think they might be. They've given up a lot the last couple of years to get some of these pieces in here, and I think one you could point to is Clint Frazier could be dangled, but I don't think they would dangle somebody like Torres, and I think Sheffield maybe, but pitching prospects are so hard to come by. I don't know. It's tough to say. Both teams can make a huge move at the deadline.
They both have the ability to.
Yeah.
So yeah, I don't know. I just think it.
But I think with the Red Sox, I think the thing is, we've seen them underachieve for 2 consecutive seasons, and if it happens again,
which is crazy to say when you won back-to-back division titles.
Right, and now welcome to life in Boston. But if it happens for a 3rd consecutive season, I think, like you said, most of the blame will go both to Dabrowski and to the players.
Yeah.
Because there'll be a huge frustration with the players, whereas the Yankees overachieved last season. They surprised everybody. They were a year ahead.
That
of
was going to
be
my point. Was that I think you got to take into account kind of the predecessor.
Right.
Replacing John Farrell got to a point around Boston that was a slam dunk. Like you knew that move was coming, and it needed to be made. Now, especially with things that have come out in spring training, where guys saying like they're finally having fun again, and just kind of Farrell's technique and approach
was exhausting.
Just wore on him throughout the season. Whereas on the flip side, Joe Girardi was, for as polarizing as he was as a manager, some people love him, some people hate him, some people thought he was a good manager, some people thought he was a bad manager. He got the most out of that team last year, and I don't think bringing in somebody else is as much of a slam dunk as it is in the case of the Red Sox, who, it was pretty obvious once the second they lost to the Astros that they were going to make the change.
Right, agreed. I think and I guess to people in New York, the Girardi change didn't surprise a lot of people because around there they thought it was time. But from the outside, I think you were like, wow, this team just, they kind of were a year ahead of their development. They made this huge leap and overachieved and went to the ALCS. Wow, you're changing the manager. But for that reason, I think if a year after you overachieve and, everyone's like, wow, you're ahead of schedule and you should be a World Series contender now, you take a step back, that's, that might go on the manager. Like I said, it could go on Stan and Judge if they struggle, but that's why I think Boone is under the most pressure because, we just saw what the Yankees are capable of. To take a step back, wouldn't be the greatest look for him. It would kind of be like, look at the Bruins this year. They obviously took, not to compare baseball to hockey, but, we're in Boston, so why not? Everyone agrees they
do whatever we want.
This season,
that's like podcast. Come on.
They took a year. They took a huge step this year. Ahead of schedule by a year. Already Cup contenders. What if next season, all of a sudden they're back down to the 8th seed, or they miss, or it's a huge step back. That's a lot.
It's actually
that's a much. That's a worse look than, let's say, if this season they just were around like the 6th and 7th seed and got into the first round of the playoffs and maybe won. When you overachieve to the extent that the Yankees did and now that the Bruins are doing, the expectations raise. And taking any sort of step back is baffling because, for a lot of people it just wouldn't make sense. But, at the end of the day, that's why I think Boone is under the most pressure. But in both teams, they have the kind of players and talent that, they could take a lot of the brunt too.
Now, Stanton, he's sucked, as we've discussed. So far, he has sucked.
He's been hot trash.
Yeah.
He had, let's take those 2 home runs in opening day out of the equation.
We can agree that he's going to figure it out. He's gonna.
Is he though? What's figuring it out for you? What's figuring it out?
I think he's gonna end up with about 40 home runs. Well, this is provided he stays healthy, which is a huge, huge if, obviously, with him. That has been, frankly, this big reason why I thought going into last season he was one of the more overrated players in baseball.
Right. He's also never played a big game in his.
So, assuming he stays healthy for a majority of the season, I think like 40 home runs. Talk about driving in like
120 or something.
Between I didn't say 110.
And those are big numbers,
like
right?
250.
Obviously,
like, you're not going to get a high average with this guy. He's going to strike out a bunch, but I think there's going to be a stretch in like July or August where he goes off here.
Yeah.
Well, let me phrase it this way then. Like now to continue on with our game of soft toss. JD Martinez on the flip side hasn't been as bad, but I think that it's been it's been sluggish. Sluggish, I think, is a good word to throw at him.
I would categorize it as unremarkable.
Unremarkable. That's good. Hasn't been bad. He's had it more or less, and we talked about this just over coffee in the break from yesterday.
Right.
About how his it's been big spots where he has.
Right.
So it's been a little more pronounced with him from that standpoint, but the overall numbers, whatever.
And now that Bogaerts is out, the
pressure,
the spotlight shifts.
Right.
Much more directly on him because he'll be up in the.
So
big
what
spots.
I'm angling towards is which of the off-season splash, which off-season
you love that word splash.
Which off-season acquisition would you you trust more to bounce back and meet the expectations, whatever your expectations are, JD or Giancarlo?
I would say JD Martinez. And again, I swear I'm not saying that because I'm a homer or because of, I'm just, I am partially take committed because I said I think Stanton will be a relative bust, but I think Martinez is a better hitter. I think, he's hit for a much higher average than Stanton throughout his career. And, I think he's got more raw hitting ability to, not get in any of these sort of prolonged slumps. Whereas Stanton has some holes in his swings, and if he gets into a rut, like we've seen right now, it could snowball. And whether that could snowball all season, I have no idea. But I think Martinez is the superior hitter. So I think he is more apt working his way out of a slump because he doesn't necessarily need the 500-foot bomb to get out of a slump. He can kind of spray it all over the ballpark.
Yeah, my gut says Stanton just because of how you've seen the potential, but JD notoriously starts slow, gets hot in the middle of the season. If you look at month-by-month numbers throughout the course of his career, just as the season progresses, gets better. So I might lean towards Martinez as well. I don't know.
Yeah, it'll be interesting.
Anyways, we got to get the hell out of here. We got other stuff to do.
Yeah, we got a little crunch for time, so that Cooperstown tease, maybe we'll get to that next week.
We'll get to that next week.
It's pretty evergreen, so
I'm going to be honest with you, I'm not even going to ask you once we get out of here anything about it because I want to be shocked and awed when I come in next week.
Well, then you'll be disappointed.
One quick question as we sign off. Is this an ALCS preview?
No. Angels.
Yeah.
Angels are getting it one way or the other.
All right. I like that. I'm still big on the Astros and Indians. I think the Red Sox might get there. I had Red Sox Indians to be in the season.
Really?
To get to the World Series, and I like the Indians. Love that ball.
Tough to pick against the Astros. But
We're getting way out of ourselves, but I appreciate you all for tuning in to this edition of the NESN Red Sox Podcast. If you want to find me on Twitter, you can do so at the Ricky Doyle. Dakota, where are you stationed?
At Dak Randall.
At Dak Randall. Tweet us all your hate mail, GIFs. I love a good meme. Love memes. If you got a meme that'll make me laugh, the more the better. Anyways, we're going to get out of here. Thanks again for tuning in. We'll see you next week. We'll talk Red Sox, probably, right?
Absolutely.
All right. See you guys.
All right. See ya.